My name is Pamela Ruth, and never in my wildest dreams did I imagine sharing this story. I grew up in privilege, the only child of Ruth and Madison. My father, a self-made businessman, had built his empire from the ground up. He was a stern yet loving figure who pushed me to strive for greatness. In contrast, my mother embodied grace and elegance, seamlessly navigating the social elite with poise. Our home, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, was a haven of luxury. I had access to the finest education, designer wardrobes, and vacations to the most exotic locations. Yet, despite this seemingly perfect life, there was an emptiness within me that I couldn't ignore. That changed in my final year of college when I met Terry Roy. He struck me like lightning, charismatic, handsome, and with a unique ability to truly see me. We began dating, and for the first time, I felt alive, like my world had finally found its color. My parents, however, did not share my enthusiasm. One evening over dinner, my mother gently insinuated that Terry might be more interested in our wealth than in me. My father was more direct, dismissing him as a man without ambition or prospects who could never sustain the lifestyle I had grown accustomed to. I defended him fiercely, insisting that love mattered more than material comfort. Things came to a head when Terry proposed to me in the park where we had shared our first date. It was a simple, heartfelt moment, and I said yes without hesitation. When I shared the news with my parents, my father gave me an ultimatum: if I married Terry, I would be disowned. Tears filled my eyes as I begged for their support and understanding, but my father's resolve was ironclad, and my mother stood silently by his side. That night, heartbroken but resolute, I packed my belongings and left the home I had always known. I moved into Terry's modest apartment, a far cry from the luxury I had grown up with, and together we began planning our wedding. I held on to the hope that my parents would eventually come around, but as the big day approached, their absence became painfully clear. On my wedding day, as I walked down the aisle and met Terry's gaze brimming with love, all my doubts melted away. In that moment, nothing else mattered but us. After the wedding, a stroke of fortune from my late grandfather changed our circumstances. His inheritance allowed us to move into a beautiful downtown apartment with high ceilings and sweeping city views. It felt like a dream, and I poured my heart into making it our sanctuary. Terry worked tirelessly at his marketing agency, often coming home late but never failing to greet me with a smile and a kiss. Meanwhile, I found joy in decorating our space and volunteering at a local animal shelter. About a year and a half into our marriage, life shifted again. I discovered I was pregnant. The sight of the positive test filled me with a mix of joy and uncertainty. When I shared the news with Terry, his excitement was boundless. He lifted me in a jubilant twirl, exclaiming, "We're going to be parents. Pamela, this is amazing." The arrival of our son, Zachary, was a moment of pure, overwhelming love. From his tiny fingers to the tufts of dark hair that mirrored Terry's, he was perfect. In that instant, my life felt fuller than I had ever imagined. I sent a photo of Zachary to my parents, hoping it might bridge the growing chasm between us. I waited anxiously for a reply, but their silence was deafening. Not a word, not a single acknowledgement. Terry noticed my disappointment and tried to reassure me. "They'll come around," he said with a warm smile. How could they resist this little guy? I clung to his optimism and refocused on our small, loving family. As the months passed and Zachary grew, I felt a longing to reclaim a part of my identity. After some searching, I found a part-time position as a manager at a local boutique. It seemed ideal, a chance to balance work and home life. My days became a whirlwind of feeding Zachary, managing work, running the household, and collapsing into bed at night, only to repeat it all the next day. As Zachary's first birthday approached, I began noticing a change in Terry. He grew distant, often coming home late and constantly glued to his phone. Concerned, I finally asked him one evening, "Is everything okay at work?" "Yeah, just busy with a big project," he replied, his tone dismissive and his eyes avoiding mine. The unsettled feeling in my gut grew stronger. On the surface, our life seemed perfect: a beautiful son, a lovely home, and decent jobs, but something felt off, an invisible crack spreading through the foundation of our relationship. One evening, as I was tucking Zachary into bed, Terry's voice carried an unusual seriousness. "Pamela, we need to talk," he said, his expression tense. Cornering me in the nursery, he suggested, no, insisted, that I quit my job. "The house is a mess, and Zachary needs more attention," he claimed. I was stunned. Quitting my job wasn't an option I had ever considered. I loved my work and felt we were managing just fine, but Terry was relentless. "I'm the man of this house," he declared, his voice rising. "I'm telling you, it's time to quit." We argued long into the night, but his unyielding stance wore me down. With a heavy heart, I resigned the next day, convincing myself it was for the best. I poured myself into my new full-time role at home, cleaning, cooking, and spending every waking moment with Zachary. I tried to find fulfillment in the rhythm of daily life, but something within me felt hollow. Weeks turned into months, and the gap between Terry and me widened. His behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started coming home later each night, sometimes reeking of alcohol. Unusual withdrawals from our bank account began to catch my attention. One evening, while folding laundry, I decided to confront him. "Terry, where is all our money going? We're barely making ends meet," I asked, keeping my tone calm. His reaction was explosive. "Maybe if you knew how to budget properly, we wouldn't have this problem," he snapped. His words cut deeper than I expected. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. Things continued to deteriorate. Terry's criticisms became relentless. The house was never clean enough, the meals weren't good enough, and I wasn't giving Zachary enough attention. The tension reached its peak when Zachary fell ill with a severe flu. Feverish and inconsolable, he required constant care. After 2 sleepless nights, I pleaded with Terry, "Please, can you take a day off work? I'm exhausted." His response was cold. "Take a day off? Are you kidding me? Some of us actually have to work for a living, Pamela." The next day, he came home with a suitcase. "I'm going to a hotel for a few days," he said flatly, leaving me standing there, stunned and holding our sick child. "I need to rest after work, not listen to a screaming kid," Terry declared, his voice cold and final. I stood frozen in disbelief as he walked out the door, leaving me to handle everything alone. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house, and I collapsed to the floor, cradling Zachary in my arms, overwhelmed by exhaustion and heartbreak. I tried to soothe both his cries and my own. The man who had once adored me seemed to have vanished. At that moment, I desperately missed my parents. I longed to call them, to hear my mother's calming voice and feel my father's protective embrace. But pride and shame held me back. How could I admit they might have been right about Terry all along? As I rocked Zachary to sleep, my father's warning echoed in my mind. "He's not the man you think he is, Pamela." The days following Terry's departure were a blur of sleepless nights and endless responsibilities. Thankfully, Zachary's fever eventually subsided. As he recovered, I found myself with more time to think, perhaps too much time. The cracks in my marriage were becoming impossible to ignore. When Terry returned a week later, he was like a stranger, distant, irritable, and resentful toward both Zachary and me. One evening, he came home earlier than usual, his expression serious, a stack of papers in his hand. "Pamela, we need to talk about insurance," he announced, sitting down at the kitchen table. He explained that he had taken out a $3 million life insurance policy on himself and suggested I do the same. "It's for Zachary's future, in case anything happens to either of us," he reasoned, his tone insistent. "Don't you want to make sure he's taken care of?" While his words sounded logical, something about the situation unsettled me. $3 million, Terry? That seems excessive, especially since I don't work outside the home anymore, I said cautiously. His eyes hardened. "It's for Zachary's future," he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Despite my unease, I nodded slowly, agreeing to consider it. Over the following days, Terry's behavior grew increasingly peculiar. He was glued to his phone, texting at odd hours and stepping out to take calls, often locking himself in our home office. My unease turned into a gnawing suspicion I couldn't ignore. One morning, after Terry left for work, I reached a breaking point. The uncertainty was unbearable. Trembling, I searched online for help and found the number for CC Top Private Investigations. A gruff voice answered, "CC Top Private Investigations, how can I help you?" Taking a deep breath, I stammered, "I need someone to follow my husband. I think he might be cheating." The investigator's voice softened. "I see, ma'am. Why don't you come into our office so we can discuss the details?" That afternoon, with Zachary napping peacefully, I met with an investigator named Emma. She was straightforward and attentive, her demeanor putting me at ease as I poured out my concerns: Terry's late-night phone calls, his secretive behavior, and the drastic changes in his attitude. Emma took detailed notes, her expression serious yet understanding. "Don't worry, Mrs. Roy," she reassured me, "we'll get to the bottom of this. I'll have my best person on it." As I left her office, a mix of fear and relief washed over me. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I knew I couldn't live in the shadows of doubt any longer. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, relief and dread, both fighting for dominance. Part of me desperately clung to the hope that this was all a misunderstanding, but deep down, I feared that the truth would change my life forever. 2 weeks later, Emma called with the results of the investigation. Her voice was somber, and I braced myself. "Mrs. Roy, we have the report ready. You might want to sit down for this." My heart hammered in my chest as I sank into a chair, preparing myself for whatever came next. "I'm ready, tell me everything." Emma's words hit me like a storm. The evidence was irrefutable. Terry had been unfaithful. He had a mistress. The report laid it all out: photographs, text messages, hotel receipts. It was overwhelming, undeniable proof. My world shattered. The next morning, after Terry left for work, I sprang into action. My hands trembled as I packed a bag for Zachary and me, just the essentials: clothes, diapers, a few of Zachary's favorite toys, and some family photos that once held precious memories now felt like painful reminders of everything I was losing. "We're going to see Grandma and Grandpa," I told Zachary as I strapped him into the stroller. He giggled, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding around us. To avoid rush hour traffic, I decided to take the metro to my parents' house. As we approached the station, my mind raced with plans for our future, but then disaster struck. Crossing the street, I heard the screech of tires. In an instant, I shoved Zachary's stroller to safety, only to feel the impact of the car hitting me. Pain overwhelmed me, and then darkness took over. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital room, the steady beeping of machines around me. Terry sat beside the bed, looking worn and anxious. "Zachary?" I croaked, my throat dry with fear. "He's fine, Pamela," Terry reassured me, squeezing my hand. "He's with Bella, your best friend, not a scratch on him." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by the searing pain in my body. Glancing down, I saw that both my legs were encased in casts. "You have multiple fractures in both legs," Terry explained softly. "The doctors say it'll take about a year to fully recover. You'll need to use a wheelchair for a while." I closed my eyes, trying to process the gravity of this news. The road ahead would be long and challenging, and I wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. But then, amid the haze of hospital lights and sterile smells, a sudden clarity struck me. "I know about her," I blurted out, my eyes wide open as I studied Terry's reaction. "Your mistress. I know everything." Terry's face drained of color for a split second. He seemed ready to deny it, but then his shoulders slumped. "It wasn't serious," he mumbled, his voice small. "It was a stupid mistake." His next words came in a rush. "When I got the call about your accident, I realized how close I came to losing you. I can't lose you, Pamela. Please, can we start over? Give me another chance. I'll do better, I promise." Looking at him, the man I had once loved so deeply, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, and though my heart felt heavy, I was exhausted from the turmoil of the past few weeks.
"Okay," I found myself saying, "we can try." The day I was discharged from the hospital felt surreal. Terry showed up with a bouquet of pink peonies, my favorite flowers. His smile held a mix of concern and affection as he helped me into a wheelchair. Hope flickered within me. Maybe, just maybe, we could salvage what was left of our relationship. The first few weeks back home were surprisingly pleasant. Terry was attentive and caring, helping me with daily activities and treating me with a tenderness that reminded me of the happier times we had shared. One evening, as we relaxed on the couch, Terry looked at me with a hopeful gleam in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he began, holding my hand gently. "We should get away for a weekend, just the two of us, to celebrate your recovery. And, well, us, really." My heart fluttered with a mix of anticipation and nervousness as I asked, "What do you think?" Terry smiled, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I found a cozy little house in the mountains," he said, his voice filled with promise. "It overlooks a beautiful canyon. What do you say?" His suggestion sounded like an idyllic escape. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, "but what about Zachary? And I'm in a wheelchair." "I'm sure Bella wouldn't mind watching him for a couple of days," he answered with a shrug. "And as for the wheelchair, I'll carry you if I have to." "Come on, it'll be good for us." Swayed by his enthusiasm and the chance to reconnect, I agreed. The drive to the mountain retreat was peaceful, the winding roads offering breathtaking views that seemed to ease the tension built up over the past few months. The cabin, nestled in seclusion, Was everything he promised charming and with a stunning view of the canyon? After settling in, Terry suggested I rest while he explored the area. You relax, I'll check out the surroundings, he said before heading out. Alone, I decided to catch up on emails, something I hadn't done since the accident. Searching for my phone, I rolled over to Terry's laptop. As I opened the browser, an unfamiliar email caught my eye. The subject line sent a chill through me. Urgent, new information about your case. With trembling hands, I opened the message. It was from Emma, the private investigator I'd hired weeks ago. My heart raced as I read her urgent words. Mrs. Roy, I've been trying to reach you. Your number is out of service. I've uncovered disturbing new information. You're in danger. Your husband was involved in your accident. He's trying to get rid of you for the insurance money. The world seemed to freeze as the weight of her words sank in. The serene escape Terry had planned suddenly felt ominous, and every moment with him now took on a sinister hue. The email contained disturbing evidence, photos, text messages, and a video of a woman, eerily similar to Terry's assistant, driving the car just before the accident. Overcome with shock, I quickly closed the laptop as Terry walked in. I tried to mask my panic, though my heart pounded wildly. Everything okay? He asked casually, though his eyes were sharp. Yeah, I just can't find my phone, I lied, my voice shaking slightly. Have you seen it? He shrugged nonchalantly. Oh, it must have broken in the accident, he said, his cold smile sending a shiver down my spine. Can I borrow your phone? I forced myself to ask, keeping my voice steady. I want to check on Zachary and see how he's doing with Bella. He hesitated, but then handed me his phone. Sure, go ahead, I'll just be right here. With trembling hands, I dialed my father's number. I couldn't directly call the police, but I remembered a coded signal we'd established years ago. As my father answered, I kept my tone bright. Hey, Bella, how's everything going? How's Buddy the bear doing? There was a slight pause before my father's voice came through, disguised by a higher pitch. Oh, same old, same old. How about you? Relief washed over me. He understood. It's lovely up here, I said, aware of Terry's watchful gaze. I'm at this beautiful cabin, 147, Pine Ridge Road. The view of Evergreen Canyon is just stunning. I see, my father replied cautiously. When do you think you'll be back? Oh, I dream of seeing you right now, I said emphatically. I miss you guys already. After a few more pleasantries, I ended the call. Terry seemed satisfied, suspecting nothing. As evening fell, he suggested we take a walk. The sunset over the canyon is beautiful. We shouldn't miss it, he said, his tone light, but fear gripped my heart. That sounds nice, I managed to reply, my voice barely audible. He wheeled me down a narrow path that hugged the canyon's edge. The view was indeed breathtaking, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, but all I could think about was the sheer drop just feet away. Terry pushed me forward, talking about the scenery as if everything was fine. I closed my eyes and silently prayed, hoping my father would find us in time. Suddenly, we reached the edge of the cliff. Terry turned my wheelchair to face him, and the loving mask he'd worn until now dropped. His cold, detached expression sent a chill through me. You know, Pamela, he said, his voice icy, I'm really sorry it had to come to this. The car accident was supposed to take care of everything, but you just had to survive, didn't you? My blood ran cold as the full realization hit me. Terry, please, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Don't do this. He laughed mirthlessly. Do you have any idea how perfect this is? A tragic accident at a scenic overlook. Your wheelchair rolls off the edge when the brakes fail. I'll be the grieving widower, inherit your apartment, and cash in on that $3 million insurance policy. It's foolproof. As he spoke, he inched my wheelchair closer to the cliff's edge. I closed my eyes, silently praying for a miracle. Suddenly, the sound of shouts and rapid footsteps filled the air. My eyes snapped open just in time to see my father sprinting down the path, several police officers hot on his heels. Pamela, my father cried, his voice urgent. Just as Terry was about to push me over the edge, my father grabbed the handles of my wheelchair and yanked me back from the precipice. The police tackled Terry to the ground, reading him his rights as they cuffed him. I watched in stunned silence, the reality of what had nearly happened sinking in. My father knelt beside me, pulling me into a tight embrace. Overwhelmed, I broke down in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Dad, I gasped, between sobs, you were right about him, I should have listened to you. He stroked my hair gently, his voice thick with emotion. No, sweetheart, I'm the one who should be sorry. We let our pride keep us apart. Can you forgive us for not being there for you and Zachary? I nodded silently, my tears speaking volumes. In that long, poignant moment, years of hurt and misunderstanding melted away. In the weeks that followed, my life changed drastically. I filed for divorce, and with the overwhelming evidence against him, Terry was sentenced to prison for attempted murder. His mistress, who had driven the car during the accident, was also convicted. The apartment, now a place of painful memories, was sold. I bought a new home, one close to an excellent school for Zachary and just a few blocks from my parents' house. During my rehabilitation, I moved back in with them, and it was a year of profound healing, physically and emotionally. My parents doted on Zachary, making up for lost time. Slowly, amid the love and care of my family, I began to trust again, smile again, and hope again. I rebuilt my life from the ashes of my past, finding strength in the renewed bonds with my family and the promise of new beginnings.